I've been asked to do a video kind of showing how to do this gel transfer process that I've been doing, gel medium transfers onto glass. And so this is my first video like this. I hope things turn out well. What I have is an image that I've laser printed onto sticker backing paper. I have some glass squares. This is a nice product. It's called memory glass, but it's been discontinued. So I'm kind of running out of these. I actually have some microscope slides on order. It's the same kind of glass, just plain glass, frosted or clear. Either one of them will work for this project. So I'm hoping to get those slides in soon so I can do a little bit more of these. And then I'm using gel medium. That's my main thing that I'm using to do the adhesion, do the transfers. And for that I'm using just a bottle of medium. I have I have a paintbrush, some water, some blotting paper, and then I have this is just a bone folder, which I'm going to use for burnishing at a later step. Finally, there are some spring clips. I'll use those for clamping when I get to that point. So there's 3 basic steps to this process, and you could do it all in a day, but typically it's going to take a couple of days for full drying time. The first step is to put some medium on top of the image. I want to use a damp brush, so I'm going to get that a little bit wet and blot it off. And I'm using the medium here. I've not tried this with inkjets. I assume that it would not work properly because ink typically runs in gel medium, and the laser printer works a lot better. So I'm going to use the brush, and I'm just going to do a nice, thin, even coat on top of the image. It doesn't have to be a lot. It just has to be enough so that it completely covers the image. That looks a little bit thin. I'm going to add just a little bit more and see. Typically I want to be able to kind of see the brush strokes just a little bit. I know it's hard to see from the video, but that's kind of the way that works for me. Then I'm going to take a piece of the glass. I want to make sure I have the frosted side going down toward the image. And I'm just going to drop it on top like that. And give it some pressure, make sure that it fits down there. I don't want to wiggle it around too much because already that image is it is kind of loose on paper, and if I start shifting things around it might actually scrape off. So I just want to give it a little bit of pressure. Then I'll take another piece of glass and put it underneath to make sure that the pressure is nice and even all the way around, just in case my surface is not flat. And I'm going to weight it down with this high-tech bottle of lotion, which works really nicely for this. I'm just going to set that aside. I've got a scrap piece of that backing paper that I'm going to put on top of it. This is just the backing from a sheet of labels, just something from work that's waste, would have been thrown away. Stuff from stickers, anything like that. Just your basic backing paper for any kind of sticker or label, because it has a non-stick surface. Typically it's silicone or silicone, and that will keep things from sticking. So I'm going to set that down there and put the weight on top of it, and that will sit. I like to leave it overnight. You can do it within a couple of hours once it's dried, but I really like to give it a full cure time, keeping it as flat and as still as possible. Step 2 is then to release an image from the backing paper. You can see this is one that I had done previously, and it's stuck on there really well. It's not coming loose. But what's happening here is that the gel medium has adhered really well to the ink from the print, and it's adhered really well to the glass, particularly on the frosted glass. It sticks really, really nicely to the frosted glass. But it's not quite as firmly stuck to the backing paper, which is kind of the whole point. So I'm going to turn it over. I'm going to use this. I'm using this bone folder, which is something that I just happen to have, but you could use almost anything that is got a rounded shape to it. Anything that doesn't have any firm edges, you could use a rounded pen cap or something like that. I'm burnishing from the center out, and you can actually kind of see It's not going to be very visible in the video, but you can see as you rub, the paper gets glossy where you've done your rubbing. So you can kind of check your progress that way and make sure you've gotten all the way around the edge. Your rubbing needs to be kind of firm. You don't want to rub so hard that you're going to damage the surface or tear the surface, but you want to make sure that you're rubbing really well and getting everything done. So that process will actually unstick the medium and the ink from the paper. So then I'm just going to curl this up and peel it off and see how well this worked. This is always kind of the moment of truth. And you can see there's always a little bit of ink that stays stuck. You can see some older ones that I've done where more did it. There's always a little bit that comes loose, and I think that kind of contributes to an effect that it's kind of a weathered or kind of a wabi-sabi look to the process. I'm going to put down a piece of paper here just so you can see the image a little bit better. This is the back of the image, of course. If I flip it over, you can see what the front looks like. This is just a black and white drawing, and there's not a lot of excitement to it, so I'm actually, before I do the sealing step, on this particular one, I'm going to do a little bit of coloring. I have some of these markers, permanent markers. The Staedtler Lumicolor works really, really well. That's what I have experience with. And I can just color it in, just like I would color anything else. I'm going to make his sweater yellow there. And I would just continue doing that and fill it all in and color whatever I wanted to do. See if I wanted to do a background or something like that. One thing I have learned is that nice archival ink pens, like this Prismacolor pen, these do not work. If they're water-soluble ink, they will run as soon as the medium touches them. So you don't want to use those. You do want to use permanent markers that are water-fast. So I'm not going to finish coloring this one for now. What I'm going to do is show you now the third step, which is the encapsulate. Okay, so I had a little technical difficulty there, but it gave me a chance to finish the coloring on this. And I did, like I said, I used the permanent markers. I also used some colored pencils. They work just as fine as well. So I did that. That's done. And let me flip it over so I have the uncolored, so I have the frosted side up. And this is the last step. This is the final putting everything together. So what I'm going to do now is I'm basically just going to sandwich this between two pieces of glass. I've got a second piece. I've already signed it down in the corner. I like to sign my work, so I've done that. And this is going to be very similar to that first step where I'm going to basically just seal it all together. So again, damp paintbrush. In this particular case, I'm painting onto the ink side of this surface. It doesn't have to be that side. I could just paint on the plain glass, but I think it's a little bit easier to see this way. Very similar to the first step, I want a good even coat. Try not to have any bubbles, nice and thin. And then I'm going to sandwich it together, just like that. And you can see, even though I'm using this frosted glass, that once they're pressed together with that fluid in between, it all becomes quite clear. And then I'll just use the clamps to hold it all together so that I can set it aside for drying like that. Just like that there. And then I set it aside. Like I said before, typically I want to take it overnight to do that so that it dries completely and makes a really good strong seal. So when you're finishing these, you can, sometimes you'll get a little bit of extra medium squeezing out the edges. You can scrape that off just with a pocket knife or any other blade. You could bind the edges with tape to keep them from being being sharp. This is glass, it's a little bit sharp in the edges. I'm not too concerned about that with this particular project. You could wrap them with wire, make pendants out of them. You could hang them, make window hangings, things like that. There's lots of different things you can do with them. In this case, I happen to be part of a group that has this, we hide marbles and leave clues for each other to find them on Facebook. And so these are things that I'm hiding because I don't have the equipment to make custom-made marbles. So that's an example of one of the ones that I've done. Other things that you can do, when you first have your image printed out on your paper, you can distress that image. It's very loosely attached to the paper, so you can use almost anything to affect that surface, to scrape off some of that ink. You could, kind of scrape away the background to highlight the center of an image or whatever you wanted to do. There's lots of different possibilities with that. Just make sure to not use a whole lot of pressure on that. You don't want to stretch the paper, and you don't want to scratch the silicone off of the front of it, because that might make paper stick to the image, which would be a little bit harder to take off. You can add other media. This is one that I did. I actually put a piece of thread in there between, I had a painted image and I sandwiched a piece of thread between that and a clear glass. That's kind of fun. You could do mixed media or collage type of things, but keep in mind that that adds a lot of thickness very quickly, and you'd be able to see, I can actually get my fingernail in there. There's a significant gap between those pieces of glass, and that might affect your work depending on how you want to use it and where you want to use it. The ones like this are completely sealed around the edge, and they're going to stay sealed and stay waterproof. You could also, I'm just using plain gel medium, which is essentially colorless acrylic paint. You could tint this. You could add acrylic paint to it and tint it a particular color, so then you get like a full color wash over your image, which might be kind of an interesting thing to play around with. Anyway, there's lots of different things you can do with that. That's about everything I have for you today. Show you a few other examples. This is one I haven't put the back on yet. These are all ones that I've been working on over a period of time. I'm having a really good time playing around with this process and kind of learning how it all works. And I hope you give it a try. If you have any questions, go ahead and ask them in comments, and I'll try and respond. And thank you very much. I hope you enjoyed my first art instruction video.